So I know you guys have talked about read alouds in your PD for disciplinary literacy. So this Lunch and Learn is going to be a little more about think alouds along with your read alouds because those add extra content and extra support for our students. Um, so it models to students how readers think. Some of the students already do that automatically. Most of us already do it automatically without thinking. But this way they see what questions they need to ask or what they need to stop and think about while they're reading. You can also add in other strategies as you go with these think alouds and build upon them with a read aloud or with an activity that you're doing in class. You can talk about comprehension strategies, questioning strategies, prediction, inferences, what connections you make to other things. Vocab is a big one because you can point out your subject words and context clues and how to use them, and how students can do that as they're reading as well. You can also point out things that are confusing, that might be confusing to them, and show them how questioning and looking at other things around it can help them. And then after you model those activities, you can also have students start to do their own annotations as you're doing a think aloud, or have them do it when you're reading aloud or when they're reading on their own. And they can do their own annotations, and then you can use that for an activity later on. I actually show this in the prep video. So the next part of this is just going to go through how I prep for a think aloud. Okay, now that I've talked about what I do with read alouds and think alouds, I'm going to show you the prep that it takes for me to get through a read aloud. A lot of times what I'll do for read alouds, especially if we're not working with a specific article or reading in class, is I'll read part of my book talk for that day. Sometimes I'll read a whole chapter, sometimes I'll stop in the middle of it. I'm not going to do the entire chapter for this because you guys will get the idea. Close enough. So the good thing, or close enough with just a little bit of it. And the good thing about doing this is you could also do it while you're doing the read aloud. So that way it models to the kids how they should be thinking and what they should be thinking about while they're reading through it, and how they could possibly annotate a reading. So I'll have my sticky notes as I'm reading because I don't necessarily think about the questions that I do during a think aloud automatic. Well, it is automatic. So I have to slow myself down to think about what I could do in these think alouds so the kids can see it. Plus, practicing also gets me used to the words, so I'm not doing a cold read, and it can also possibly show me what passages I shouldn't read, or if I need to change any words and do some editing. Okay, so when I was a kid, my mom constantly invented games. The quiet game, the who can make the cookie last longer game. A perennial favorite, the marshmallow game, involved eating marshmallows while wearing puffy Goodwill jackets indoors to avoid turning on the heat. The flashlight game was what we played when the electricity went out. We never walked anywhere, we raced. The floor was nearly always lava. The primary purpose of the pillows was building forts. So this first paragraph is actually a great example. We've been working on writing and show versus tell. So I'm going to write down good example of show versus tell, because it doesn't come right out and say they were poor. Have to infer. So that models inferencing to students, and then examples of how I want them to use writing skills as well. Our longest lasting game was called I Have a Secret because my mom said everyone should at least have one. Some days she guessed mine, some days she didn't. We played every week right up until I was 15, and one of her secrets landed her in the hospital.
The next thing I knew, she was gone. So this would actually, I would draw an arrow down to that and ask the question in class, possible things that happened to mom. Because predicting along with using inferring is important for students with reading as well. Your move, princess. A gravelly voice dragged me back to the present. I don't have all day. Not a princess, I retorted, sliding one of my knights into place. Your move, old man. Harry scowled at me. I didn't know how old he was, really. And I had no idea how he'd come to be homeless and living in the park where we played chess each morning. I did know that he was a formidable opponent. You, he grumbled, eyeing the board, are a horrible person. 3 moves later, I had him. Checkmate. You know what that means, Harry. He gave me a dirty look. I have to let you buy me breakfast. Those were the terms of our long-standing bet. When I won, he couldn't turn down the free meal. To my credit, I only gloated a little. It's good to be queen. So one thing I would write down is formidable. And I would talk through techniques to use for context clues and how to determine the meaning of that word as I was reading. I would also go back to inferring skills in this passage and talk about, tells me a lot about her character. Sorry about the bells. There's a certain dog that wants to go outside. Because we know she doesn't have money. But helping a homeless guy. So that's just a quick example of some of the prep it takes, which doesn't really take that long. And it's a great way to model to the kids. Plus, again, if you want to take this one step further, a few times after you've done it, you could read, pause, tell them, okay, what's something that you notice about this paragraph, or what's something we can infer, and then they write it down, or just say, after we've read that paragraph, take your sticky note and write down something and mark up the passage. So that way you've already modeled the technique, and now you're having them do it.
So that's basically the process on what I do on how to prep for a think aloud / read aloud. I almost always read through it, and I don't just read through it silently. I will read through it out loud. Again, practice. And sometimes I've talked to the kids about how I've practiced before, because that's a good reading strategy too. And that way, again, I know where to put those questions or possible think aloud things, or even if it were a passage that I was using as a model text or what we've used in compo class, I specifically point out things I want to make sure that they learn or understand. So that's a good help. And for a lot of the read alouds that I do with book talks, young adult literature isn't always what I want to read aloud in a front of a classroom of freshmen. So that was when I edit out words or change them. So if you have any other questions or want some more help with that, please stop in anytime. I also have a couple of books that would help improving comprehension with Think Aloud strategies. This has a lot more specifics on Think Aloud strategies and some more specific things you can do with it to help in your classes. And then this is teaching reading in middle school, but it still has some strategies to use for Think Alouds, and it explains it a little more in one of the sections on the book. So you're welcome to borrow those at any time. And I hope this was helpful.